Have you ever had a strange feeling that maybe the events we're seeing play out today aren't random? That perhaps the chaos, the wars, the confusion that we're experiencing right now was actually anticipated centuries ago? Have you ever wondered, is history just an accident or part of a big unfolding story? What if I told you that a tiny nation the size of New Jersey dominates global headlines not by accident, but by ancient design? That Israel, a country you could drive across in 3 hours, occupies more United Nations resolutions than North Korea, Iran and China combined, because it was prophetically foretold. In this JTV documentary, we're going to crack open ancient biblical prophecies so precise they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about current events. We'll discover how an 1800-year-old Talmudic text reads like yesterday's intelligence briefing, predicting Iran's threats and global panic with terrifying accuracy. We'll unlock Torah verses that numerically correspond to the exact years of Israel's rebirth, the Holocaust, and even October 7th, revealing a divine mathematics that will leave skeptics speechless. You'll learn why ancient rabbis described flaming arrows of death a millennium before rockets existed, why they predicted suicide attacks using the metaphor of bees that sting and die, why they foresaw attackers targeting, quote, young men and maidens suckling babies with venerable elders, the exact words that describe October 7th. But here's what will truly astound you. These aren't just predictions, they are blueprints for understanding the greatest transformation in human history. According to these prophecies, we, right now, are living through the final chapter of what Jewish sages called the Fifth Exile. Are you ready to discover why the world can't look away from Israel, and why this obsession proves ancient prophecy is becoming modern reality? Let me read you something that will make your jaw drop. This was written in the Zohar, the Kabbalistic document centuries ago, and I want you to listen as if you're hearing today's breaking news. Quote, "The children of Ishmael are destined at that time to incite all the nations of the world to come to Jerusalem together with them. As it is written, I will gather all of the nations to Jerusalem for war. All the nations will ready themselves against Jerusalem and make peace among themselves. They will turn against Israel to annihilate it for having established its own government. It will be a time of distress for Jacob, yet they will not collapse but be saved from their distress." Now before you dismiss this as ancient mysticism, let me explain who the children of Ishmael refers to. Ishmael, Abraham's first son through Hagar, is considered by both Jewish and Islamic tradition to be the forefather of the Arab world. This isn't just something Jews believe, the Quran itself traces Arab lineage back to Ishmael, claiming he was the son who was nearly sacrificed, though Jewish sources maintain it was Isaac. So when this ancient text speaks of the children of Ishmael inciting all nations against Jerusalem, it's describing Arab leadership of a global coalition against Israel. And look at what it predicts with stunning accuracy. The nations will make peace among themselves to turn against Israel. Think about the unprecedented global consensus we're seeing, from the UN to university campuses, from European parliaments to international courts. Traditional enemies are indeed making peace among themselves to focus their hostility on one tiny nation. They will target Israel specifically for having established its own government, for daring to exist as a sovereign Jewish state. This isn't about specific policies or actions, it's about Israel's very existence as an independent nation. But here's the key, it will be a time of distress for Jacob, yet they will not collapse but be saved from their distress. Written centuries ago, this prophecy describes our current moment with breathtaking precision. We're witnessing exactly what was foretold, the children of Ishmael leading a global coalition against Israel, and we're living through the fulfillment of what our sages called the Fifth Exile, the Ishmaelite exile. Throughout Jewish history, we've endured 4 great exiles: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Each exile had its purpose, its lessons, its spiritual correction, but ancient sources predict something unprecedented, a 5th and final exile that would be different from all others. The Zohar, written centuries ago, makes a startling declaration: no exile will be as oppressive of the Jewish people as the Ishmaelite exile. I made some inquiries about this. The most difficult of all exiles? Haven't we had incomparably difficult exiles? How bad is this going to be? And it was explained to me that we never yet had the level of guilt. The guilt the Jews are made to feel in this exile. The guilt of being told that they're not even who they say they are. They don't belong in the land of Israel. They don't have the right to protect themselves, defend themselves. That, in many ways, has been incomparable in our history. Rabbi Chaim Vital in the 1500s was even more specific. At the end of days, Israel is destined to experience the Ishmaelite exile. The fifth and last exile will be the most difficult of all. Here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't primarily a physical exile. Unlike the Roman exile that scattered Jews across the globe, the Ishmaelite exile occurs while Jews are returning to their land, rebuilding their state. It's a spiritual and psychological exile, a challenge to the very core of Jewish identity and purpose. And that challenge has been building for over a century, reaching its crescendo on October 7, 2023. Before we dive deeper into this prophecy, let me show you something that will convince the biggest skeptic that we're dealing with divine orchestration, not coincidence. There's an ancient tradition that every verse in the Torah corresponds to years in history, that major events are somehow encoded in the very structure of biblical text. Israel was re-established in 1948, corresponding to the Hebrew year 5708. The 5708th verse in the Torah is Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 3, quote, "And the Lord your God will turn your captivity and have compassion upon you, and will return and gather you from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you." The one verse in the entire Torah that speaks of return to the land after centuries of exile corresponds exactly to the year this occurred in modern times. But it gets more incredible. The Holocaust years, Hebrew years 5695 to 5705, correspond to verses in Deuteronomy 29 that describe devastation. Quote, "All the curses of the covenant, the whole land is brimstone and salt and a burning," and the verse corresponding to 1945, the war's end, where we faced the climax of the suffering and inexplicable sentence of the Holocaust. Quote, "The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever." In other words, this is the epitome of suffering and the divine mystery behind it. And now let's bring this to the modern day, October 7th. Let's go back to the beginning first of all, to the story of Ishmael himself. When Hagar was pregnant with Abraham's first son, an angel appeared to her with a prophecy that would echo through millennia. Quote, "You shall name him Ishmael, for God has heard your prayer, and he shall be a wild ass of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and over all his brothers shall he dwell." But there's something extraordinary hidden in the Hebrew text. The word used for the evil that will befall the Jewish people at the end of days, v'karat, appears only one other time in the entire Torah. It's in the very verse about Ishmael's birth. The Torah is linguistically connecting the end times tribulation of the Jewish people directly to Ishmael. The medieval commentaries elaborate on this prophecy in many ways that read like descriptions of modern terrorism. The Talmud said Ishmael would shoot flaming arrows at Isaac. Rashi, writing 1,000 years ago, describes them as flaming arrows of death. Think about it, a millennium before rockets existed, our sages were describing Ishmael's descendants attacking the Jewish people with flaming projectiles that arc through the sky. Today, Israel lives under the constant threat of exactly that. Ancient sources also predicted that Ishmael's descendants would attack like bees, striking and dying in the process, just like suicide bombers. They described how these attacks would target people of all ages, indiscriminately, exactly as we witnessed on October 7th. To understand the deeper purpose behind this final exile, we need to grasp what's really at stake in the conflict between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. This isn't ultimately about land or politics, it's about a fundamental theological crisis that began when Israel was re-established in 1948. For over a millennium, Islamic theology rested on a simple premise. God had rejected the Jewish people, scattered them across the earth as proof of his displeasure, and chosen Islam as his new covenant. The wandering Jew, the persecuted Jew, the dhimmi, was seen as validation of Islamic supremacy. But then something happened that shattered this narrative at its core. The Jews returned. Not only did they return, but they thrived, built a modern state, defeated much larger armies. What did this mean theologically? Either God never forsook the Jewish people, which would undermine core Islamic claims, or this return must be a satanic deception that needs to be destroyed. There's no middle ground in this theological framework, and this explains the obsessive focus on Israel throughout the Muslim world. Palestinian leaders openly admit their nationalism exists only as a tool to eliminate the Jewish state. As one Saudi negotiator told Jared Kushner, "I feel sorry for the Palestinians because they have to bear the weight of the Arab world on their shoulders." The weight of this massive theological challenge. So why does God allow this final confrontation? The answer lies in understanding a crucial verse from Deuteronomy that explains the entire divine strategy behind our current crisis. Quote, "They had provoked my jealousy with a non-God. They had provoked my anger with their vanities. So I will provoke their jealousy with a non-people. I will provoke their anger with a foolish nation." God is describing a deliberate strategy when his chosen people begins relying on non-gods, secular ideologies, international institutions, material success rather than spiritual connection. He uses a non-people to redirect their attention back to him. In my mind, this captures the Palestinians perfectly. By Palestinian leaders' own admission, their national identity was created solely to delegitimize Israel. There never was a Palestinian state, never a call for Palestinian nationalism before Israel's creation. It's a non-people manufactured specifically and cynically to challenge Israel's legitimacy. And here's the genius of the divine strategy. The more Israel tries to gain acceptance by conforming to international standards, maintaining the world's most ethical military, building a thriving democracy, contributing massively to global progress, the more the world condemns it. This paradox is divine. The world will never treat Israel like just another nation, because everyone intuitively recognizes that Israel is not just another nation. The Jewish people have a unique role in human history, and attempts to normalize this relationship will always fail. This forces the Jewish people to confront a fundamental choice. Will they continue seeking validation from the nations, or will they remember their unique divine calling? Now comes the part that left me pretty speechless. After discovering how Torah verses correspond to historical years, I had to ask, what verse corresponds to October 7th, 2023? October 7th occurred in the Hebrew year 5784. The 5784th verse in the Torah is Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 29. Quote, "If they were wise, they would understand this. They would reflect upon their fate." But when you read this verse in context, the prophecy becomes chilling. Just verses before, God describes provoking his people with a non-people, a foolish nation. This non-people will cause terror, attacking, quote, "young men and maidens, suckling babes with venerable elders, indiscriminate violence against people of all ages." Could this non-people refer to the Palestinian cause, a national identity that by Palestinian leaders' own admission was created solely to undermine Israel? The prophecy continues with haunting accuracy. How can one pursue 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight unless their rock had sold them out and the Lord had given them over? I think about what happened at the Nova Festival massacre, how relatively few attackers were able to cause such devastating damage against thousands of festival goers. For a moment, it seemed like God had abandoned his people. Hamas celebrated in Gaza's streets, handing out candy, convinced their success validated their cause. But then comes the key verse that actually corresponds to the year of October 7th. "If they were wise, they would understand this. They would reflect upon their fate." The Torah is warning them. Don't mistake God's seeming temporary withdrawal for permanent victory. This apparent success is actually the setup for their ultimate downfall. The verses that follow promise divine vengeance and the redemption of those who are suffering. Before we continue with the video, I want to share something with you. The entire anti-Israel movement is built on one central accusation: that in 1948, Israel stole the land, and ever since, Palestinians have simply been resisting. But what if everything we've been told about this story is untrue? What if the real history of 1948 shows not Arabs being forced out, but Jews, while seeking peace, having to fight for their survival against a genocidal enemy that willed its destruction long before Israel's re-establishment? Have a watch of the trailer for our new, groundbreaking and essential documentary entitled What Really Happened in 1948. And if you want to see the full film, just click the link in the video description. In 1948, the world witnessed the rebirth of the Jewish state, the State of Israel. A moment celebrated as a miracle of survival and self-determination after centuries of persecution and the horrors of the Holocaust. Yet for decades, this event has been twisted into a narrative of theft and catastrophe, with the so-called Nakba portrayed as Israel's original sin, where Jews allegedly stole Arab land and displaced innocents in a premeditated act of ethnic cleansing. But what if this story is fundamentally inverted? What if the cause and effect are the other way around? Not Israel aggressively seizing territory and Arabs responding in self-defense, but Arabs, driven by deep-seated hatred, rejecting the Jews' legal and historical rights to live in their ancestral homeland and waging a genocidal war long before Israel's re-establishment. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the unvarnished truth about 1948, the centuries of pogroms and anti-Semitic violence that set the stage, the Arab leaders' explicit calls for extermination, and the defensive war Israel fought to secure its existence. We'll challenge the pervasive lies head-on, showing how Arab rejection of peace wasn't about creating a Palestinian state, but about denying Jews the right to live at all. From the Nazi-allied leader of the Arabs in Palestine, the Mufti al-Husseini, to the forgotten occupations by Jordan and Egypt, where no Palestinian state was even considered, this is the story of a conflict rooted not in displacement, but in whether the Jews deserve to live in their homeland. Join us as we debunk the myths with facts, confront the historical record fairly but firmly, and reveal why 1948 was not an act of aggression, but a righteous response to annihilation. This is what really happened in 1948. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description. But the ancient predictions about Ishmael's descendants get even more specific. There's a verse in Psalms that seems to perfectly describe the suicide bombing phenomenon, written thousands of years before anyone could have imagined such a thing. Psalms 118 verse 12 says, "They encircle me like bees, but they are extinguished as a fire does thorns." A 20th century rabbi made an incredible observation. How does a bee attack? It leaves its stinger in the victim at the cost of its own life, exactly like a suicide bomber. The psalm seems to be describing attackers who kill themselves in the process of attacking others. The ancient text Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer goes even further, listing 15 specific things the children of Ishmael would do in the land of Israel at the end of days. Among them, they would repair the breaches in the walls of Jerusalem and build a structure on the Temple Mount. This was written centuries before the Islamic conquest of Jerusalem, yet it perfectly describes what happened. The Muslims rebuilt Jerusalem's walls and constructed the Dome of the Rock precisely on the site of the ancient temple. The level of detail in these prophecies is staggering. We're not dealing with vague predictions that could be interpreted any number of ways. We're dealing with specific, detailed forecasts that have come to pass with mathematical precision. The Torah provides incredible insight into this conflict through the story of a theological rivalry between Ishmael and Isaac that has echoed throughout history. The Talmud describes a debate between them about who demonstrated greater devotion to God. Ishmael boasted, "I'm greater than you in fulfilling God's commandments. You were circumcised as an 8-day-old baby who couldn't resist. I was 13 and chose to undergo circumcision despite being old enough to refuse." Isaac replied, "Are you trying to intimidate me by referring to a commandment you fulfilled through a single organ? If God told me to sacrifice my life for him, I would comply without hesitation. I have greater self-sacrifice." Immediately after this exchange, God tested Abraham with the command to sacrifice Isaac, validating Isaac's claim of ultimate devotion. But look how this competition plays out in Islamic practice today. Jews pray 3 times daily, Muslims 5 times. Jews fast for 25 hours on Yom Kippur. Muslims fast from dawn to dusk for an entire month during Ramadan. There's a consistent pattern of trying to outdo Jewish religious observance. But there's a crucial difference. When Isaac expressed willingness to sacrifice his life, he expected no reward, it was pure devotion to God's will. Islamic martyrdom, however, promises immediate paradise with material rewards. It's ultimately self-serving rather than devotional. This theological competition explains why Islamic tradition has twisted the biblical account to claim that the binding of Isaac was actually the binding of Ishmael. This pattern of challenge followed by transformation isn't new. It's actually the continuation of a story that began with our forefather, Jacob. Jacob's entire life was spent running, avoiding direct confrontation, always trying to maneuver around problems rather than face them head on. His very name means heel because he grabbed Esau's heel at birth, and because everything he did afterward was roundabout, reactive. For most of his life, Jacob fled from Esau, which represents the Western world. He was oppressed by Lavan, and he lived in a constant state of flux. This mirrors perfectly the 2,000-year Jewish exile, the wandering Jew, always on the run, always trying to avoid confrontation. But then comes the pivotal moment. Near the end of his life, Jacob encounters an angel, the representative of Esau, and something unprecedented happens. Instead of fleeing, he fights. In this battle, he's wounded in his reproductive area, his seed, but he emerges victorious. The angel asks his name, and when Jacob responds, the angel declares, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and man, and have prevailed." Consider the profound symbolism. After a devastating blow to Jacob's seed, representing Jewish continuity, he emerges with a new identity. No more flight, no more passive acceptance of persecution. Now there is fight, confrontation, sovereignty, and remarkably, immediately after this transformation, Esau, representing the nations of the world, blesses Jacob with his new name, Israel, just as the United Nations voted for Israel's re-establishment in 1947. The parallel to modern Jewish history is unmistakable. The Holocaust, representing the wounding of Jacob's seed, followed immediately by the establishment of Israel and international recognition. Think about the fact that they chose to call it Israel. They could have chosen many names, but they chose Israel. From passive victim to active fighter, from Jacob to Israel. The Ishmaelite exile is completing this transformation, forcing the final evolution from defensive survival to confident assertion of Jewish purpose and destiny. Now here's where multiple prophecies converge. We're witnessing what I call Purim 2.0, the same divine pattern that saved the Jewish people in ancient Persia playing out again today. In the original Purim story, Haman, the Persian prime minister, convinced the king to annihilate all Jews throughout the empire, effectively the world. For 11 months it looked like the end, but then came the complete reversal, where the Jews' enemies were destroyed instead. Today, Iran, modern Persia, is playing a crucial role in this final drama. An 1800-year-old Talmudic prophecy describes how, quote, "The king of Persia will set out to destroy the whole world, and all nations will panic." Iran's nuclear threats and its network of proxies across the Middle East perfectly fulfill this ancient prediction. But here's what's remarkable. Iran's Persian leadership is orchestrating exactly what the Zohar foretold, inciting the children of Ishmael and all nations against Jerusalem. Through its proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran has built up an army of hostility toward Israel. But just like in the original Purim story, when the enemy may seem like it's gaining strength, we see a catalyst for a divine reversal. October 7th, which seemed like a devastating blow to Israel, has triggered a chain of events that the prophecies suggest will ultimately lead to the downfall of Israel's enemies. There's an ancient source in the Midrash that describes the moment we're living through right now, saying, quote, "When the King Messiah is revealed, he will come and stand on the roof of the temple, and will make his voice heard to Israel, and say to them, 'Humble ones, the time of your redemption has come. And if you do not believe me, look at my light that is shining on you.'" Rabbi Manis Friedman elaborated on this prophecy with two profound insights. First, he points to the tragic irony of Jewish humility. Humble ones, the Messiah says. And indeed, look how humble we are. We are so humble we are afraid to even say we are chosen. We're defensive and apologetic, even guilty toward a world that has persecuted us for millennia, and today accuses us of war crimes for simply defending ourselves. How humble! But there's such a thing as too humble. After 2,000 years of being told they're rejected, displaced, irrelevant, Jews have internalized this narrative. Even as they've returned to their land, built a technological miracle, contributed disproportionately to human progress, many still approach the world hat in hand, seeking approval. The divine message is clear. Enough. The prophecy says, "Arise, shine, not apologize and hide." The time has come to stand up and speak the truth about the Jewish mission in history to be a light to all the nations. Rabbi Friedman's second insight is even more revolutionary. You want proof that redemption is here? Look around you. We complain about the world's obsession with Israel. We're frustrated by the media attention, the political focus, the UN's disproportionate condemnations. But Rabbi Friedman asks us to see this differently. This is exactly what the Midrash predicted. Look at my light that is shining on you. God is shining the spotlight on Israel. God is bringing the world's attention to the Jewish people, not as a punishment, but as a preparation. This global obsession isn't persecution, it's positioning. The master of the universe is handing the Jewish people the microphone on the world's biggest stage. Every time Israel is in the headlines, it's an opportunity to share the message they were given at Mount Sinai. Every time someone asks, "Why is everyone talking about Israel?" it's a chance to explain the purpose of Jewish chosenness. The world's inability to ignore Israel isn't a bug, it's the fulfillment of prophecy. The light has risen upon Israel, and now all nations are being drawn to walk in that light, exactly as the ancient Midrash foretold. We are living through the culmination of the greatest story ever told, a story that began with Abraham's call 4,000 years ago and is reaching its climax in our lifetime. The prophecies have unfolded with mathematical precision, Torah verses corresponding to exact historical years, ancient predictions of modern terrorism, the systematic defeat of Israel's enemies, and the global spotlight shining on the Jewish people as they prepare to fulfill their ultimate mission. The Midrash promises that in the Messianic era, all nations will walk in the light of Israel. That light isn't military might or technological prowess. It's the divine wisdom and moral clarity that the Jewish people have preserved through millennia of exile and persecution. For the Jewish people, let's stop apologizing for who we are. Stop seeking approval from those who will never give it. Stand up, shine your light, and embrace the role you were given at Sinai. The world is watching us, not to condemn us, but to learn. God has handed us the microphone, so let's use it. For supporters of Israel worldwide, understand that you're supporting more than a nation. You're supporting the fulfillment of human destiny itself. For all people of faith and decency, recognize that you're witnessing the unfolding of divine prophecy in real time. The ancient words are becoming modern reality. Isaiah's prophecy rings true today. Arise, shine, for the light has come. The strange obsession with Israel isn't random. It's proof that God is preparing the world stage for the final act. The microphone is in the Jewish people's hands. The spotlight is on. The world is listening, waiting for the light that will guide all nations toward their ultimate destiny. The 1800-year-old prophecy concluded with words that ring truer today than ever. My children, don't be afraid. Everything I did was only for your sake. The time of your redemption has arrived. That time is now. The prophecies are being fulfilled before our eyes. The Ishmaelite exile will come to an end, and we have the privilege of witnessing the moment when ancient Israel becomes the light unto the nations it was always meant to be. The ancient code has been cracked, the headlines are making sense, and the greatest chapter of human history is about to begin. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and you're watching JTV. I'm so excited to share with you something that I've been working on for a while. We've just taken JTV content to the next level. Introducing JTV Plus, a new platform streaming exclusive content created and handpicked by me. Get ready for jaw-dropping documentaries, exclusive interviews, insider access, and so much more. JTV Plus brings you captivating stories that will shock and inspire you, stories that honestly, I'm discovering for the first time too. From Israel to Jewish history to Judaism, it's all there. In exclusive interviews, you'll hear guests open up about things they've never shared publicly before. Plus, I'll take you behind the scenes where I get a lot more personal with you. By joining JTV Plus, you're not just joining an exclusive community, you're partnering with me to help JTV reach new heights. Just search j-tv.plus and join our exclusive community today. There's a link in the video description. I'll see you there.